So, when you hear people talk about AI in the economy, it feels like there are only two stories being told, and they couldn't be more different. One promises this incredible future of explosive growth and prosperity, while the other warns of a complete systemic meltdown. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into both of these extreme, totally conflicting futures.
And I mean, just look at this. On one side, you have visionaries like Cathie Wood, who are literally predicting that global growth is about to triple. But on the other, you have scientists warning of, well, civilizational instability. It doesn't get much starker than that, right? So this is the core conflict we're exploring. Is AI the engine of our greatest boom, or is it the trigger for our greatest bust?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll frame this whole thing as two paths diverging. Then we'll make the case for explosive growth, and right after, we'll look at the case for a total systemic collapse. From there, we'll ask who's actually in control, what the limits of human adaptation are, and then we'll wrap up with some real-world signals you can actually watch for right now.
Let's just dive in and treat this whole thing like a big thought experiment. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts behind both the utopian vision and the dystopian one to really understand how we could possibly end up in either of these futures.
All right, first up, the techno-optimist vision. This is the story you hear coming out of Silicon Valley from investors like Cathie Wood. It's a future of prosperity like we've never seen before, all driven by these massive productivity gains that are just going to completely reshape our world.
Now, this is where things get really interesting, because you have to put this moment into context. For pretty much all of human history, economic growth was basically flat, zero. Then, you get something like the steam engine, and it kicks off this acceleration that has basically continued for centuries. The argument here is that AI isn't just the next step on the ladder, it's a rocket ship.
Okay, so why the huge leap? What makes this time so different? Well, according to Cathie Wood, it's because for the first time ever, we have 5 of these huge, game-changing platforms all hitting their stride at the exact same time. And the key, the absolute linchpin, is AI. It turbocharges all the others, from robotics to how we read our own genes. This convergence is what creates that potential for truly exponential growth.
And this chart, wow, this really just shows you the sheer scale of what they're talking about. We live in a world, we're used to a world that grows at 2 or 3% a year. The optimist case says we're heading for a world that grows at 6, 7, maybe even 9%. That's a completely different reality.
So you're probably wondering, where on earth does all that growth come from? Well, it boils down to this. The core belief is that AI is going to make the world's 1 billion knowledge workers, people like you and me, on average, 4 times more productive. I mean, just imagine doing in a single day what used to take you almost a full week. That's the engine of this whole hypergrowth scenario.
Okay, take a deep breath, because now we have to flip the coin and look at the complete opposite scenario. This view, which comes from a research paper called The Great Decoupling, warns that this exact same acceleration doesn't lead to prosperity at all. Instead, it pushes our fragile economic system right past its breaking point.
The whole dark scenario hinges on this one really scary idea: an automated deflationary spiral. It's basically a vicious cycle, where a company trying to become more efficient could, weirdly enough, help trigger a total economic collapse. Sure, AI might help a company's bottom line, but if it destroys wages and people's ability to buy things in the process, the whole system just seizes up.
So let me just walk you through how this could actually play out step by step. First, a company uses AI to replace some expensive workers. Makes perfect business sense, right? But then, those people who lost their jobs, they stop buying stuff. So overall consumer demand across the economy falls, and suddenly company revenues are shrinking. So what do? They have to cut costs even more with, you guessed it, more AI. And the cycle just feeds on itself, spiraling downward.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The researchers actually built a model to simulate it. And in their simulation, even as individual companies were getting more efficient thanks to AI, the overall economy just craters. The speed at which money changes hands, what economists call money velocity, it just collapses. And the result? A potential contraction of nearly $6 trillion. It's a scenario where efficiency basically becomes macro-suicidal.
But you know, this isn't just about abstract economic models. There's a huge question of power here. Who is actually building this future, and what do they want? Journalist Karen Howe has this really compelling argument that we need to stop thinking about these as just companies and start thinking of them as modern-day empires.
And Howe points out these 4 classic moves that these AI empires make. They take resources that aren't theirs, like scraping all of our data from the internet. They exploit labor, both by displacing us
and by using low-paid workers to clean up their data. They monopolize knowledge, basically hiring every top researcher out of universities. And maybe most importantly, they control the story, framing their quest for dominance as some noble fight for the future of humanity.
And this is the kicker. This isn't some accident or an unfortunate side effect. According to Karen Ha, the goal of replacing human labor is baked right into the mission. I mean, OpenAI's own definition of AGI, their ultimate goal, is a system that outperforms us in most economically valuable work. They are, as she says, saying the quiet part out loud. And if you want to understand the sheer ambition driving all this, just look at this quote from OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman way back in 2013. This isn't about just building a cool product or a successful company. The mindset here is about architecting the next organizing principle for society itself. Now here's the thing, whether you're a techno-optimist or a doomsayer, whether you believe the boom story or the bust story, both of these futures run smack into the same wall. And that wall is us. Can we, as human beings, and our institutions, our schools, our governments, can we actually adapt as fast as this technology is moving? And this slide just lays out the fundamental mismatch so clearly. It's like a race between a rocket ship and a person on foot. Technology's speed is exponential. AI capabilities might double every 6 months. But human speed, our ability to learn a new skill, change careers, for our laws to catch up, that's slow and linear. We operate on the scale of years and decades, not months.
Think about that famous 10,000-hour rule, right? It takes something like 5 years of really hard work to become an expert in a new, complex field. That's the human part of the equation.
Now compare that to the speed of AI. In the time it takes you to painstakingly master a new profession, the AI frontier might have doubled its capabilities several times over. It could make your brand new skills obsolete before you even really get to use them. This really calls into question that simple story we tell ourselves that we can all just reskill our way through this disruption. So with these two wild, totally different futures staring us in the face, what are we supposed to do? What do we even look for? Let's try to ground this whole thing in a couple of concrete, real-world signals that might tell us which path we're actually on.
Okay, here's the first thing you can watch, and it's a big one: long-term bond yields. Look, if the financial markets truly believe we were about to hit that 6 to 9% explosive growth, future interest rates would have to be way higher, and you'd see that reflected in bond prices today. So far, we're really not seeing that signal.
And the second one is maybe a little more obvious, but just as important. Watch the big tech stocks, the Magnificent Seven. Is all the wealth and power continuing to concentrate in those few companies? Because if it is, that points down the path of what some people are calling techno-feudalism and a much more fragile system. If you start to see the market gains broaden out to many more companies, that could be a sign of a healthier, more distributed kind of growth. I really want to leave you with this final thought. It's an analogy from that great decoupling paper, and honestly, it sums up the entire dilemma better than I ever could. The real danger here might not be that AI turns evil. It's that the economic engine we're building is just too powerful for the social structures, the wooden wagon that we've built around it. And the question for all of us is, can we reinforce the wagon before it completely shatters?